For 12,000 cycles, the Kavor ruled every corner of the galaxy that mattered to anyone alive. The name alone made entire species bow their heads and offer tribute without being asked. They stood 30 feet tall when fully extended. Their bodies were covered in living crystal armor that grew thicker with every battle won, and reflected energy weapons like mirrors. The crystals shifted colors to show mood or rank. Deep violet meant supreme command. Bright red meant kill without question. Their minds linked together in one perfect hive. No single Kavor ever felt alone. No single Kavor ever made a mistake, because the Overmind corrected every thought before it finished forming. The Overmind lived at the center of their homeworld in a structure so large it blocked out the sun for half the planet. It was not a building. It was grown from the fused bodies of the first Kavor who achieved unity. Millions of years ago, they decided individuality caused weakness. They removed it piece by piece. Piece until nothing remained but one endless shared consciousness. The Overmind spoke in waves that traveled faster than light. Every warship, every soldier, every drone heard the same command at the same moment. Perfect obedience, perfect strategy, perfect victory. They never lost. Not once. Not in the long wars against the methane breathers of the core veil. Not in the siege of the silicon mines on the Black Rim. Not against the swarm fleets that ate stars for fuel. Every enemy either joined the hive as lower drones or vanished from history. The Kavor collected the useful genes of the defeated. They improved themselves. They grew stronger. They expanded. They claimed the right to do so because no one could stop them. When the first human signals appeared on the edge of known space, the Overmind barely noticed. The scout drones reported small metal tubes moving slowly between stars. The life forms inside needed oxygen. They were small. Their bones broke easily. Their skin offered no protection. Their weapons looked primitive compared to crystal lances and neural disruptors. The Overmind labeled them prey species, Category 4, low threat, minimal genetic value, useful only for labor after conversion. The order went out. A single subfleet would handle the task. 3 war spires, 12 support carriers, 50,000 attack drones, standard harvest protocol. No need for more. The war spires dropped out of slip space above the human colony called New Shanghai. The planet looked small and blue from orbit. Cities clustered along the coasts. Forests covered most of the land. No orbital defenses, no shield generators, no fleets waiting in ambush. Just a few satellites, and some ground stations that sent friendly greetings in broken trade tongue. The Kavor ignored the messages. They began the standard descent pattern. Orbital lances fired first. They carved glowing lines across the surface. Continents cracked open. Lava spilled into oceans. The bioswarms followed. Millions of insect-like machines poured from the carriers. They ate buildings. They dissolved vehicles. They turned living tissue into nutrient paste for the conversion vats. On the ground, humans ran at first. Then they stopped running. They picked up tools. They climbed into machines. They aimed crude guns at the sky. The first resistance came from a group of workers in a mining camp. They loaded explosives into ore haulers. They drove straight at the landing swarms. The haulers detonated on contact. The blast shredded thousands of drones and cracked the armor of one descending dropship. The Kavor noted the loss. They adjusted. They sent more drones. The humans responded. They dug tunnels. They hid in caves. They used the planet itself against the invaders. They flooded low areas with river water mixed with industrial chemicals. The mixture ate through crystal joints and shorted neural links. The subfleet commander watched the data streams with calm interest. The losses were higher than expected, but still acceptable. Mammals showed spirit. That was good. Spirit made better drones after conversion. The commander ordered the second phase. City crushers moved forward. Towering machines on 6 legs. Each leg ended in a plasma drill. They leveled districts one by one. Humans fought back with whatever they found. Molotov cocktails made from fuel tanks, spears made from rebar, traps made from collapsing buildings. One group even managed to bring down a dropship by attaching cables to its landing gear and pulling with heavy tractors. The ship crashed into a factory. The explosion lit the night sky for miles. The Overmind received the first full report. The subfleet had lost 8% of its drones and one dropship. The harvest progress stood at 12%. The mammals refused to gather in large groups for easy collection. They spread out, they struck and vanished. They used their small size to hide in places too narrow for Kavor units. The Overmind considered this odd. Most prey species collapsed quickly under orbital fire. These ones kept fighting. The Overmind upgraded the assessment from Category 4 to Category 3. Still prey, still harvestable, just more effort required. A second order went out. The subfleet would increase pressure. They would target water supplies. They would burn forests. They would force the humans into open areas for final collection. The war spires moved closer to the planet. They prepared saturation bombardment. The commander felt confident. The mammals would break soon. All species broke eventually. On the surface, in a hidden command bunker beneath a mountain range, a human general stared at flickering screens. Smoke filled the air outside. The room smelled of sweat and burnt wiring. The general turned to his officers. They looked tired, dirty, bandaged. Some cried quietly. Others sharpened knives with steady hands. The general spoke in a low voice. "We are not winning today. We are not losing either. We are making them pay. Every minute, every life, every ship part, they lose. Costs them more than it costs us. Keep that up. Keep bleeding them. Keep surviving." The officers nodded. They understood the math already. The Kavor had numbers. Humans had time and hate and cleverness born from desperation. Above them the war spires aligned for the next strike. The crystal hulls glowed with charging weapons. The Overmind watched through 1,000 eyes and felt no worry. The harvest would finish. The mammals would join the lower ranks. The cycle would continue, as it always had. But somewhere in the galaxy, a quiet change began. The name humans started to appear in scout reports, not as prey, not as nuisance, but as something new, something that refused the script. The Kavor did not know it yet. Their long, perfect reign had just met the first real obstacle in 12,000 cycles. The stars waited to see what would happen next. When the last war spires went dark, the humans moved in to finish the task. They swept through the wreckage. They checked every hull. They cleared every chamber. They made certain no crystal link survived. They did not act from anger. They acted from the need to end the threat forever. The choice had been forced on them, and they chose survival. The Kavor species vanished completely. No single warrior remained. No ship stayed intact. No mind kept its power. The galaxy stood in total silence. The long reign that lasted 12,000 cycles had stopped. The humans turned to the next work. The vassal species began to take apart the old empire. They pulled down tall monuments. They burned the old banners. They cleared the tribute halls. They started to build their own paths. The humans offered aid without demands. They brought machines. They brought seeds. They brought knowledge. The vassals accepted with open hands. They rebuilt their cities. They replanted their fields. They opened their skies. The trade routes grew busy. The routes carried goods without fear. The routes carried people without chains. The routes carried ideas without limits. The galaxy felt new life. The life flowed free and strong. The humans returned home to their own worlds. They repaired the broken places. They planted new forests. They raised new cities. They cared for the wounded. They taught the young the full tale. The tale of the long fight. The tale of the high cost. The tale of the final choice. The young listened and understood. They learned the value of never yielding. They learned the strength in standing together. The humans kept watch. They stayed ready. They stayed united in their own way. The watch kept the peace held across the stars. On the rebuilt Earth, The grizzled admiral climbed a high hill. He stood under the open sky. He looked out at the endless stars. The stars shone clear and bright, without any shadow. He spoke the simple truth. They were considered dominant, right up until they were not. The words carried on the breeze. His companions heard and nodded. They knew the full meaning. The meaning that no power lasts when it meets those who refuse to break. The humans had not wanted the end. They had wanted only to live. They had finished what the HFY War started. The humans moved forward. They explored new systems. They built new ships. They met new friends. They lived with the memory. The memory stayed alive in stories. The stories warned and guided. The guidance kept them true. The cleanup lasted many years. The crews worked without pause. They faced dangers in the ruins. They faced the weight of what they saw. They supported each other through it all. The work changed them. The work made them wiser. The humans used the lessons. They built better defenses. They built better ways to help. They built a future that no one could crush. The future spread. The spread reached every world. The worlds grew in the light. The light came after the dark. The dark ended when humans stood firm. Galaxy remembered the events. The events became legend. The legend told of the tall crystal rulers. The legend told of their perfect unity. The legend told of the small mammals who broke it. The legend spread through schools, through halls, through songs. The songs spoke of persistence. The songs spoke of the price. The songs spoke of the win. The humans did not boast. They simply kept going. They kept reaching. They kept caring. The caring made the difference. The difference saved many. The many now lived free. The free lived because the humans killed them all. The admiral met with old comrades. They shared quiet meals. They recalled the hard days. They looked at the new skies. They agreed the cost was high. The cost was worth the result. The result was a galaxy without one ruler. The humans accepted their part. They carried the responsibility. They carried it with steady hands. The hands that had fought now built. The building went on. The on and on created wonders. The wonders filled the stars. Welcomed the change. The change was complete. Years flowed and the old wounds closed. The new generations asked questions. The elders gave plain answers. They said, "We did what had to be done." The answers satisfied. The satisfaction led to more growth. The growth filled the empty places. The places once ruled by fear. The fear was gone. The gone left room for hope. The hope burned bright. The bright hope belonged to all. The all included the humans who had ended the dominant who learned too late. The late lesson echoed forever. The forever echoed in the quiet after the end. The humans kept the spirit alive, the spirit of the persistence predator, the spirit that never rests, the spirit that adapts, the spirit that wins. The wins came not from size but from will. The will stayed strong. The strong will shaped the ages. The ages unfolded in peace. The peace was the true victory. The victory humans claimed without crowns. The humans claimed it with open arms. Welcomed the future. The future was theirs to share. The share made everything better. The better galaxy thrived. The thrived because they killed them all. The Armada reached the breaking point near the Orion Veil. 200 war spires remained, but many showed scars. Long cracks patched with emergency crystal growths. Hulls dimmed from power shortages. Drone swarms thinned to shadows of their former size. The Overmind pushed harder. It sent every available unit forward. It ignored the growing strain in its own links. The humans waited in ambush. They had spent years preparing. They hollowed out asteroids. They laced them with scavenged drives. They filled them with antimatter charges. They built carriers from the bones of dead HFY War ships. They covered the hulls in stealth plating made from melted crystal. The fleet looked small compared to the enemy. Yet every ship carried something deadly. The first sign of trouble came when a scout drone vanished. It sent one final image. A human ship, too close, too fast. The Overmind dismissed it as luck. Then more drones disappeared. The Armada slowed. They scanned for traps. They found none. Learned to hide better. They used decoy signals. They bounced false heat readings off ice clouds. They made the enemy chase ghosts. The Cavor burned fuel. They lost time. They grew frustrated. The doubt in the hive mind spread wider. Synapse clusters argued. They questioned orders. They felt fear for the first time. The Overmind tried to crush the fear. It flooded the links with rage. It failed. The fear stayed. Human scientists finished the Cascade phage in secret labs buried under dead moons. They started with captured neural gel. They grew it in vats. They tested strains on living prisoners. The phage did not burn. It whispered. It slipped into crystal pores. It traveled along neural pathways. It severed connections for seconds, then minutes. The severed minds felt alone. They panicked. They screamed inside their own skulls. The humans watched. They recorded. They improved. The final version spread through air. It clung to armor. It survived vacuum. It activated on command. The scientists loaded it into missiles. They loaded it into drones. They loaded it into suicide craft. They waited for the perfect target. The target appeared, the central nexus world of the Cavor, a planet covered in one endless spire. The spire housed the core of the Overmind, billions of linked bodies fused into architecture. The surface crawled with warriors. The orbit bristled with defenses. The humans named the plan Veilbreaker. A small strike force jumped in close. They used captured slipspace tech. They emerged inside the defensive net. The Armada reacted slow. Too slow. The human ships unleashed everything. Antimatter torpedoes ripped through outer screens. Railguns punched holes in war spires. Boarding pods launched. They carried augmented fighters. They carried phage missiles. They carried hope. The battle in orbit turned chaotic. Human ships danced between giants. They used speed. They used tricks. They drew fire away from the boarding teams. Cavor warriors boarded human vessels. They found empty corridors. Found traps. They found explosives wired to doors. They died in flashes. The humans fought hand to hand. They used grafted crystal blades. They used poison darts. They used rage. Aboard one captured carrier, a human sergeant faced a towering warrior. The warrior swung a neural whip. The sergeant ducked. He drove a phage injector into the joint at the knee. The warrior froze. The link snapped. The warrior looked around, confused. It saw its own kind as strangers. It turned its whip on allies. The sergeant smiled grimly. He moved on. The boarding teams reached the spire. They fought down endless halls. They passed chambers of fused bodies. They passed gardens of living crystal. They reached the synapse core, a vast chamber glowing with blue light. The Overmind pulsed there, 1,000,000,000,000 minds in one place. The team leader, a woman with one eye and grafted arms, placed the main payload. It looked simple, a black sphere the size of a head. She set the timer. She spoke low. For every world, for every child, for every day they took. She pressed the trigger. The sphere hummed. It released the cascade phage in a silent burst. The mist spread. It entered vents. It coated walls. It sank into crystal. The Overmind felt the change. At first the change felt small. A single link broke. Then 10. Then thousands. The Overmind tried to reconnect. It sent repair waves. The waves bounced back. The phage multiplied. It fractured more links. Individual warriors woke. They felt their own thoughts. They felt terror. They felt anger. They turned on each other. War spires in orbit fired on allies. They believed the others betrayed them. Drones attacked their own carriers. The Armada collapsed into madness. The humans watched from distance. They did not cheer. They simply recorded. They needed proof. Inside the spire the chaos grew. Warriors ripped crystal from their own bodies. They screamed in voices never meant to speak alone. The overmind fragmented. It became pieces. Pieces fought. Pieces hid. Pieces died. The core dimmed. The blue light faded. The humans retreated. They left the payload behind. It kept working. The phage spread through the entire structure. The spire cracked. The planet shook. The humans escaped in stolen dropships. They jumped away. They left the wreckage burning. The armada outside broke apart. Ships drifted. Some exploded. Some turned inward. The last war spires fired wildly until their power failed. The humans picked off the stragglers. They showed no mercy. They had learned that mercy cost lives. The battle ended, not with one big blast, but with silence. The silence of a mind that once ruled everything, now reduced to nothing. On the bridge of the lead human carrier, the Admiral watched the feeds. His hands shook for the first time in decades. He turned to his crew. They looked exhausted. They looked alive. He spoke quiet. We broke them, not with bigger guns, not with more ships. We broke them because we refused to stop. We made them face themselves. We made them alone. The crew nodded. Some cried. Some laughed. The stars. The Admiral looked out. He saw the wreckage. He saw the dying light of the spire. He knew the end approached. The galaxy felt the shift. Vassal worlds received the news. They tore down Kavor statues. They burned old banners. They sent messages to human fleets. The messages said thank you. The humans did not answer yet. They still cleaned the field. They still hunted survivors. They still made sure no piece of the Overmind survived. The stars stayed bright. They no longer carried the weight of one endless will. The weight lifted slow. The galaxy breathed easier. The Kavor who once claimed dominance now floated in pieces. They died not from weakness, but from the one thing they never understood: individuality, the thing they removed long ago, the thing humans never lost. The humans kept that thing. They sharpened it. They used it. They survived with it. The war did not end on New Shanghai. It spread. The Kavor sent the full conquest armada. 200 war spires, hundreds of carriers, millions of drones. They arrived in waves across every human-held system. The Overmind declared total extermination. No more harvest, no more conversion. The mammals had proven too costly. They would be erased. The armada burned colony after colony, glassed planets, turned atmospheres into firestorms. The humans lost world after world, yet they never stopped fighting. They retreated into places the Kavor hated: asteroid belts, hollow moons, deep gas giant atmospheres, ring systems filled with ice and rock. They built bases inside spinning rocks. They carved tunnels with plasma torches. They used the debris of destroyed ships to make armor. They turned wrecked Kavor vessels into traps. The armada hunted them, but every victory felt heavier. The Kavor lost drones by the thousands. They lost dropships. They lost entire support carriers to mines hidden in dust clouds. The Overmind calculated the cost. The numbers grew wrong. Each destroyed human outpost cost more Kavor lives than the last. Humans learned fast. They studied captured crystal fragments. They took apart dead warriors. They found weak points in the living armor, joints where crystal met flesh, neural nodes that controlled movement. They built weapons to match, small railguns that fired slivers of the same crystal at high speed. The slivers vibrated at the right frequency. They cracked armor like glass. They made needles from scavenged Kavor biotech. They shot poison that ate through crystal from inside. Humans even grafted pieces of Kavor flesh onto their own bodies. The grafts hurt. They twisted muscle and bone. But they gave strength. They gave speed. They gave resistance to some neural attacks. The augmented fighters looked strange, half human, half monster. They scared their own people sometimes, but they killed Kavor without pause. The doctrine spread through human fleets and bunkers. Persistence predator, they called it. Never let the enemy rest. Never let them build. Never let them feel safe. Hit and run. Strike from shadows. Bleed them slow. Make every day expensive. The Kavor burned a world. Humans struck back from the next system. They poisoned supply lines. They sabotaged slip space beacons. They left bombs and wreckage that looked harmless. The bombs waited years, then woke when Kavor ships passed close. The explosions tore hulls open. The armada started moving slower. They checked every piece of debris. They scanned every rock. They wasted time. Humans gained time. Years turned into decades. Children born in bunkers grew up fighting. They learned war before they learned school. They drew maps on walls. They practiced with toy guns made from scrap. They sang songs about dead heroes. The old soldiers grew gray. They lost limbs. They lost eyes. They kept going. Aboard one hidden carrier, the captain looked at his crew. Some had metal arms. Some had glowing graphs. From old gas attacks. He spoke low. We are not the same anymore. We are harder. We are meaner. We are still here. That is enough. The crew nodded. They loaded torpedoes. They plotted the next jump. They vanished into the dark. The vassal species watched from the edges. The ones who once bowed to Kavor now whispered. The Overmind no longer seemed eternal. Scouts reported strange things. Human ships appeared where none should be. Human voices broadcast on open channels. They told stories. They offered trade. They promised no tribute. They showed images of green worlds rebuilt. The vassals listened. Some sent secret messages. Some sent small ships with food and parts. The Kavor noticed. They punished the traitors. They burned vassal worlds as examples. But the punishment cost ships. It cost drones. It cost time. The cracks grew. Inside the Overmind, something new appeared. Doubt. It started small. A single synapse cluster questioned a loss. Then another. Then a whole sector. The hive mind tried to silence the questions. It flooded them with commands. It purged the weak links. But the questions returned. They spread like infection. The Overmind felt strain for the first time. It had never strained before. It had always been perfect. Now it hurt. The pain came not from wounds, but from the idea that victory might not arrive. The idea terrified every linked mind. Humans found ways to use that pain. They captured live Kavor warriors. They kept them alive. They talked to them. They showed them recordings of other Kavor dying. They asked questions. Why do you serve? Why do you kill? Why do you never stop? Some warriors stayed silent. Some screamed. Some broke. The broken ones spoke of the Overmind. They spoke of unity. They spoke of fear. The humans listened. They recorded everything. They learned how the hive worked. They learned the frequencies. They learned the weak points in the link. One raid changed everything. A small human team boarded a damaged war spire. They moved quiet. They killed guards. The synapse chamber. They planted a device. Small black, no bigger than a fist. The device hummed. It sent a signal. A false command. A whisper in the hive mind. The war spire turned. It fired on its own escorts. The escorts fired back. The ship died in seconds. The humans escaped. They carried data. They carried hope. The Overmind felt the betrayal. It purged the entire sector. It killed millions of its own to stop the spread. But the idea stayed alive. Doubt grew. The armada pressed on. They found human bases. They destroyed them. They thought each win brought them closer. But the humans always left survivors. They always left traps. They always left messages. Come get some. The words haunted the crystal links. The warriors heard them in dreams they were never supposed to have. The Overmind tried to erase the phrase. It failed. On a frozen moon base, a human scientist worked in a dim lab. She studied captured biotech. She grew cultures. She tested viruses. She found one that attacked the neural gel inside Kavor skulls. It did not kill fast. It made them think alone. It cut the hive link for seconds, then minutes, then hours. The scientist smiled for the first time in years. She called it Cascade. She shared the data with other labs. They improved it. They made it airborne. They made it stick to crystal. They made it spread. The weapon waited for the right moment. The war stretched longer. The Kavor burned more worlds. The humans struck from more shadows. The armada shrank. Losses mounted. The overmind calculated endless. The numbers never improved. The vassals grew bolder. Some stopped tribute. Some armed themselves. The galaxy shifted slow but sure. The once dominant species started to look tired. In the deep black, a human fleet gathered. Ships patched with mismatched plates. Crews scarred and fierce. The admiral stood on the bridge. He looked old, his hair white, his hands steady. He spoke to the fleet. This is not about winning big battles. This is about outlasting them. They are strong. They are many. They are afraid now. We keep going. We keep hurting. We keep living. That is how we win. The ships jumped. They vanished toward the next target. The stars stayed quiet. They watched the long grind. They waited for the moment when one side finally broke. The Kavor still believed they were dominant. They still believed the end would come soon. They still believed the mammals would fall. The descent on New Shanghai followed the oldest Kavor pattern perfected over thousands of cycles. War spires hung in low orbit like dark moons. Their crystal hulls pulsed with stored power, ready to unleash fire on command. The subfleet commander sent the final signal. Orbital lances activated. Long beams of white-hot energy stabbed down through clouds. They struck mountain ranges. They split cities open. They turned farmland into glowing craters. Smoke rose so thick, it blocked the sun for hours. The bioswarms launched next. Clouds of glittering insects poured from carrier bays. They spread across the surface like living fog. They consumed everything organic. They left behind only nutrient sludge and stripped metal frames. The Overmind watched through every eye and felt the familiar rhythm of harvest. The mammals would soon kneel or dissolve. On the ground, the first wave of human response looked weak. Small groups fired rifles at the swarms. Bullets sparked uselessly against crystal shells. Others threw grenades that burst into bright flashes, but did little damage. The Kavor advanced without pause. Dropships landed in ruined plazas. Warriors stepped out 30 feet tall, crystal armor shining. They extended neural whips that crackled with blue lightning. One swing cut through concrete walls and flesh alike. The commander expected screams and flight. Instead, the humans vanished into side streets. They melted into subway tunnels. They climbed into sewer pipes. They refused to stand and die in the open. Hours passed. The bioswarms reported strange patterns. Humans appeared in places they should not reach. They moved at night. They used smoke from burning buildings to hide their heat signatures. They carried wounded on stretchers made from broken doors. They shared water from cracked pipes. They whispered plans in low voices. The Kavor drones tried to track them, but the signals kept breaking. The mammals jammed frequencies with noise from old radios. They used mirrors to reflect, targeting lasers back at sensors. They even set fires in patterns that confused the swarm navigation. The commander adjusted tactics. More lances, more swarms, more warriors on the ground. The harvest percentage climbed slowly to 28%, acceptable, but slower than any previous campaign. Then the first real surprise came. A cargo ship that looked like a harmless freighter rose from an underwater dock. It carried no visible weapons, yet when it reached altitude, it launched 6 crude missiles. The missiles flew low and erratic. They twisted like living things. They struck the underside of one war spire. The impact barely scratched the crystal hull, but the warhead carried something new, a dense core of shaped plutonium wrapped in scavenged Kavor power cells. The explosion ripped a hole 20 meters wide. Atmosphere vented in a white plume. The war spire listed. It tried to correct course, but secondary blasts from ruptured conduits tore through the lower decks. The commander felt the first flicker of annoyance. A single subfleet had never lost a capital ship to primitives. The humans did not stop. They sent more ships, small, fast craft built from mining rigs and passenger shuttles. They flew straight at the carriers. Suicide runs. Some carried fusion charges. Others packed full of industrial acid still in pressurized tanks. When they collided, the acid ate through armor seals. The carriers began to leak atmosphere. The drones inside panicked without orders. The hive links stuttered for the first time. The commander ordered full defensive screens, but the humans kept coming. They used decoys made from scrap. They launched drones of their own, tiny things with cameras and explosives. They flew into engine intakes. They detonated inside fuel lines. 2 more carriers went dark. Their hulls cracked open like eggs, spilling fire into vacuum. The Overmind received the updated data stream. Losses reached 19% of the subfleet. Acceptable became borderline. Requested reinforcement. The Overmind considered the request for 3 full cycles, then approved. A single additional war spire would join the operation. No more. The mammals were clever, but still prey. The new war spire arrived in slipspace. It emerged, firing immediately. Lances carved fresh wounds across the planet. Surface cities that still stood vanished in fire. The humans answered from hidden silos deep under the ocean. They fired missiles that traveled underwater, then broke the surface at Mach 10. They carried warheads tipped with stolen Cavor crystal fragments. The fragments vibrated at frequencies that matched the enemy armor resonance. 2 lances struck true. The new war spire shuddered. A long crack ran from bow to stern. Crystal flaked away in glittering shards. The ship listed hard. It fired wildly before going silent. Prisoners started to appear. The Cavor captured small groups of fighters. They dragged them to conversion vats. The neural probes entered skulls. The Overmind searched for surrender codes. It found none. Instead, it found rage. It found memories of lost families. It found laughter shared in bunkers. It found plans drawn on scraps of paper. The humans lied under probe. They fed false data. They overloaded circuits with nonsense thoughts. One prisoner, a young woman with burns across her face, smiled as the probe dug deeper. She whispered something in her language. The translation came back. "Come get some." The phrase repeated across captured minds like a virus. The Overmind felt something close to confusion. No species had ever responded this way. The commander broadcast the demand for unconditional surrender across every open channel. The words echoed over ruined cities. The humans answered. They used every remaining transmitter. They sent the same phrase back in every language they knew. "Come get some." They added recordings of children singing defiance. They added images of fighters raising broken weapons. They added promises written in blood on walls. Cavor tried to jam the signals. The humans switched to laser bursts, bounced off orbital debris. They used tight beam comms aimed at the war spires themselves. The message arrived inside the ships. The crew heard it through their own crystal links. "Come get some." The subfleet pressed harder. They burned the last major cities. They poisoned rivers. They salted fields. The harvest reached 41%, but the cost climbed. Losses hit 37% of drones, 23% of carriers. 1 warspire crippled, 2 others damaged. The commander felt pressure from the Overmind. The harvest must finish soon. The mammals must break. The commander ordered total saturation. Every weapon, every swarm, every warrior on the surface at once. The final push began. In a deep bunker far below the shattered capital, a human admiral watched grainy feeds. His uniform hung loose on a frame thinned by hunger. His eyes stayed sharp. He turned to the officers around him. They looked like ghosts, filthy, unbroken. He spoke quietly. "We did not win today. We hurt them. We made them bleed. We showed them the price. Keep doing that. Keep surviving. Keep making every step cost them more than they can afford. The officers nodded. Some smiled grimly. Others checked weapons. One young soldier sharpened a piece of crystal scavenged from a fallen warrior. He tested the edge against his thumb. Blood welled up. He did not flinch. Above, the war spires realigned for the killing blow. Their weapons glowed bright. The bioswarms thickened until the sky turned black. The commander felt certain now. The end approached. The mammals would fall. The cycle would continue. But in the silence between commands, something shifted. The name human appeared more often in reports, not as Category 3 prey, not as nuisance, but as something persistent, something that learned, something that refused to end. The Kavors still did not understand. They thought the war would finish soon. They thought dominance remained. Unbroken. They were wrong. The stars watched and waited for the next move.